There we go. All right. You want to be in the captain's seat? Yeah. I already started the stream, so we're live. We got 2 viewers already.
Yes, we're live. Okay.
Pretty exciting. Check these guys. Sound's coming in nice. Maybe we'll fill up.
So we're live already. Okay.
We're live.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to Grace Church. My name is Father John Francis, and I am honored to be here with you today with our guest Shane Claiborne and our blacksmith Jeff Wild. We're going to start with a song called Down by the Riverside. And you can sing along with me. It's really easy. It goes like this. I'm gonna lay down my soul and cheat down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my soul and cheat down by the riverside. Gonna study, hold on. Ain't gonna study, hold on. Ain't gonna study. Down by the riverside. gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. One more time. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. All right, give yourselves a hand. It is my pleasure to introduce to you a dear friend of mine. His name is Shane Claiborne. He is a speaker and an activist and a best-selling author and the founder of The Simple Way in Philadelphia. He is a red-letter Christian, and he might tell you more about that. So please, without further ado, would you please welcome my friend Shane Claiborne to the microphone.
All right. Well, I know there are a lot of things that you can do on a Saturday afternoon in Madison, folks, so thanks for showing up here together. Amen? I know we're in the Episcopal space right now, but everybody's got an inner Pentecostal in them, I say, so we'll dig deep and show up together today. I think, this whole hour or so of the program, it moves. We move together because we live in a world where it feels like life and death are in combat with each other. Hope and hopelessness are kind of hitting us every day. And so we start a little bit heavy with the reality of gun violence, but we know where this whole thing's going, right? That we're moving towards the hope of Christ, the hope of resurrection, the hope that we will beat our swords into plows and our spears into pruning hooks. Amen? That's pretty good. Okay. And I wanted to just tell you how I got started in this work. It's been just over 10 years that we started turning guns into garden tools. And our first donated gun was an AK-47. One of those guns that's designed for one purpose: to kill as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, and it's what it keeps getting used for over and over. So we took that and we did an event on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, proclaiming that there is another way than violence, even to try to rid the world of violence. And we grieved the war in Iraq and Afghanistan on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. We had a powerful event in Philly, which we called Jesus Bombs and Ice Cream. And I teamed up with my ice cream buddy, Ben Cohen from Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream. He's the Ben of Ben & Jerry. And a good friend I have for a lot of reasons. And fudge brownie is my favorite reason. But he and I, we kind of did this event, imagining a world with fewer bombs and more ice cream. And we transformed the AK-47. We dropped Ben & Jerry's buckets with helium balloons. It was magical. We're not going to do that today, just so you know. But that was our first gun transformation. And we've been doing it for over 10 years since then. And originally, what we were thinking about was the militarism in the war. And even right now, right, we hold heavy in our hearts the victims of violence in so many different forms, right? We think of those in Ukraine, and the families in Russia that have lost their loved ones, and we think of all those who are in conflict zones. We even, kind of remember that we live in the biggest militarized country in the world, right? And so that's kind of the militarism of it. But then, in Philadelphia, we began to connect this vision of beating guns and the garden tools with the victims of gun violence in our neighborhood. And I live on the north side of Philadelphia, where this past year in the pandemic, we had the most homicides from guns that we've ever had in the history of Philadelphia. Over 500 deaths a year that are in our city. And that began to be what we see regularly, all too regularly, right? On almost every corner of our neighborhood, we have a memorial of the person and the people who were killed on that corner. And for me, it became close because there was a young man who was 19 years old. His name was Pepito, and he was killed in front of our house. And for me, that was the moment where we said enough. You know, like Martin Luther King said, we're all called to be the Good Samaritan and lift our neighbor out of the ditch. But after you lift so many people out of the ditch, you start to say, we need to do something about the whole road to Jericho. And that's when we began to organize around the gun violence in our neighborhood and endemic all over our country. In the pandemic, we hit the record number of gun deaths that we've had, over 41,000 in 1 year. So it's over 110 deaths every single day that are coming from guns and suicide. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and think about it, pray about it. But then what's exciting about today is we also have a chance to take the hammer. And we're literally going to be firing up the forge. And I'm going to introduce you to Jeff in just a second, who's going to help with that. But this was our first tool that we made in Philadelphia. This was from a handgun that we found in an abandoned house. We're taking abandoned houses and fixing them up into affordable housing, and it was just a reminder of how saturated we are with guns in this country, right? That we found this one just laying in an abandoned house, a reminder that we now have more guns than human beings in America, more guns than people. And this one, the handgun, we took and we beat it into this plow. But the reason that it's got one on the bottom, because it was the first tool that we made together as raw tools. And what was also powerful about this was in that moment, we felt really moved by the Spirit to invite folks who have been impacted by gun violence to take the hammer. It was a little bit of a winsome decision, but we saw a bunch of our friends and neighbors that had lost their children or their moms or dads to gun violence. And we just said, listen, if anybody wants to take the hammer, you're welcome to. And I'll never forget Miss Ryan's, one of our heroes in Philadelphia, using the wounds that she's survived to heal the epidemic of gun violence. She had a picture of her boy on her shirt, and she began to beat on this gun, and she's beating on it. Every thump of the hammer, she said, "This is for my boy." And this is when we realize that what we're doing today is not just poetic. It's not just symbolic. I mean, there's a part of it that's that. But it's also, to use a church word, sacramental. And that is a word that means holy mystery. Right? There's something holy about what we're doing. Seeing a piece of metal that is designed to kill, transformed into a tool of life. And it's kind of that declaration that all things can be made new. And it feels like a holy thing to do together. And over the years, we've made all kinds of stuff. This is our shovels that we're making now. And the wood stock from the guns is used for some of the handles. I'll put them up here and have them in the back. You can look at them. We've been making these hearts out of the slice of the barrel of the gun. And every time we beat those, I always think of the hearts that have been crushed by gun violence. And we declare that love will have the last word. As we beat those, we try to use every piece of the gun. So this is our love sign. This is like kind of the scraps that are left over that we make those out of. And I'll put all that up here. The cross that I'm wearing around my neck is made out of the barrel of the gun. So sometimes I tell people, this is what a gun looks like when it gets born again. You can tell I came out of the evangelical world, but that's what we believe. people in this room that have been impacted by gun violence. The statistic is almost half of Americans know someone who's been shot. Almost half. Either by homicide, accident, or suicide. And we're going to hear from a couple of those local voices today that are bringing who they are. They're more than just survivors and victims' family members, but they're kind of inviting us into their story to make that personal, because we've got to make this personal. It can't just be the statistics, right? Every single one of these lives lost is a child of God, made in the image of God, and it breaks God's heart. That's why we say you cannot be pro-life and ignore gun violence, right? That these are human beings made in the image of God. So we're going to reflect a little bit in here, but then we're going to go out to the forge for the last part of this service together. We're going to sing, we're going to pray, but I'm so glad to introduce you to Jeff. Because what we've started doing over the last 10 years is building a network of blacksmiths and metal crafters all over the country. And our hope is to have every 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours, that there would be a safe surrender site. A place where people can dispose of unwanted guns and get them off the streets. We're building that whole network in Philadelphia. I sometimes call them chop-saw churches, because we teach them how to chop guns up. And they're not all churches. Some are mosques and synagogues and community centers and YMCAs, but we're all learning this together. And Jeff's got a cool story, and I wanted him to share a little bit of it, because he's local here. He showed up, has been a pastor, but is now also an aspiring blacksmith. And I'm going to bring him up, Jeff Wild, to share a little bit of what he's doing and what he's going to invite us to join him in outside a little bit. Thank you, buddy. Good.
I am honored to be here this afternoon, to be invited to be a part of this whole worship time together. Just a little about myself. I was a ELCA pastor for 34 years and retired 7 years ago from Advent Lutheran Church on the west side of Madison. I also, the first thing I did after I retired was become a master gardener. Went through the classes. So what Shane and Mike Martin and many others are doing now attracted me partly because of my background of gardening. Also, when I was a college student, I worked a couple summers in my hometown at a place called Monarch Range. They used to make stoves that went bankrupt some years ago. But I worked in the foundry, so I was used to or accustomed to working with hot steel or iron. And so I was attracted to this as well. As a pastor of 34 years, especially when I was in Janesville, Wisconsin for 17 years, I presided at as many as 30 funerals a year. And out of the hundreds of funerals that I presided at, I'd say about a dozen of them were because of suicide. Half of those were suicide by using a firearm. What we know is, as Shane mentioned, 41,000 people died from gun violence last year. Half of those are by suicide. And I personally was touched. I knew most of the suicide deaths are people who died by suicide. It's painful for a pastor. It's painful for a family. It's painful for a church community. It's painful for a city when there's somebody you know that you believe that they didn't have to die in that way. So that experience was a motivator. In 2019, when I was still subscribing to Christian Century, because I could put it on my pastoral allowance and book notes, I read an article that was co-authored by Shane Claiborne and Mike Martin about gun violence, and I also was aware that, the article helped to lift up their book, Eating Guns, for those who are weary of gun violence. I was moved by the article, and I thought, I want to read the book. I ordered the book, and was so impressed by the content of the book and the Christian perspective that both Shane and Mike brought to that book, or brought to the book and discussion, that I ordered 10 books, and I gave them to people who I thought may have an interest in this, including a retired psychiatrist from the Veterans Hospital who worked with veterans and is very much aware of the suicides by death among veterans. And I decided after reading the book that time I was retired, I can do this, and I want to do this, and I consider this to be a calling at this time in my life. I wondered why I didn't speak out more in pertaining to gun violence as a pastor, and I wonder why so many clergy are complicit in addressing this issue. I wonder why so many congregations are complicit in addressing this issue. And so I decided I was going to do what I can to lift up the issue of gun violence in this part of Madison, Wisconsin. So when I was blacksmithing, I took classes for about 3 years. And after the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, the Kenosha shooter, I was just so disgusted by the verdict that he walked free that I decided to go public. I wanted to do a public demonstration of forging, and the church my wife and I belong to now, the pastor said, yeah, we would support that. We can't be there. We have company that weekend. But the executive committee said, no, go. And didn't want that to be happening because of the volatility of the situation and the recent deaths that took place in near Milwaukee as well. And but so I decided I'll go to parks and started doing demonstrations in parks. And from there I was able to gain some traction and have been presenting to church communities, and even the church my wife and I belong to now, that congregation hosted the first Guns to Garden Tools buyback on June 11th. And the material I'm using today comes from that gun buyback.
Let me hold your microphone so you can keep sharing and use both hands.
So, my tools are a little bigger. I'm so glad to see Shane's because I'm wondering how these guys do this.
Those are harder down there, tell me that.
Yeah, you have to check the weight. I learned that from after I was in Vermont learning. But this is called a Maddox. It's one of the tools that I know people Shane works with, raw tools make, hand trowel. And I'll leave this one for grace of this today, out of appreciation for your having me with Shane. We will be working with making these with, yesterday I have, in terms of larger barrels, I have only 2 double-barrel shotguns left, and I've never had to cut a double-barrel shotgun. It took me forever yesterday. I cleaned it up with my grinder, but we'll be working with this to make something originally like this, and then we're going to trim this off and then forge it into a hand trowel. The other tool that you'll be invited to work with is the Maddox. And interestingly, I had a blacksmith that I worked with who happens to be a member of the NRA. We've had interesting discussions. He has a power handler and took 22 barrels that we received at the gun buyback and squared them up for me. It saves a lot of time. And we will be working to make something like this. And so I'll explain that as we're working at the forge this afternoon. Let's see. The only thing I'll show you yet, at the gun buyback, we received 30 guns, which I thought was wonderful for a first time. The Dane County Sheriff's Department sponsored a gun buyback a couple of months ago, and they received like 500 firearms, which I thought was incredible. Unfortunately, they couldn't give them to me because of the agreement with the county, but I'm working with the sheriff for next time. But we did receive 2 AR-15s. The person who drove in and said, I'm a hunter, I own guns, but I inherited 2 AR-15s from my brother who died. And so this is the barrel of an AR-15. And when my wife saw it, she said, can you imagine young people in a classroom seeing the end of a barrel, the last thing they saw in their life? And that's why I hold on to this. It just was a powerful comment from my wife. So I continue to do this, not only because of my own rage over the car I lived in Hillsbury, but there doesn't a week pass by when we hear of a mass shooting in Raleigh, North Carolina this past week, or something related is in the news. Alex Jones, who denied the Sandville killings, is fined almost $1 billion, and he's sarcastic about it. We've heard 2 debates this week, senatorial and governors, and the whole question of gun rights and gun laws comes up in the debates. This week, a police officer had shot another man in a nearby community from the Dane County Sheriff's Department. Though we hear it so often, it just so often passes us by. When I'm foraging, I keep track and pray for all those who are affected almost every day during that time. I don't mean to take this.
No, that's perfect. Give a hand for Jeff. This is our first time doing a team up like this too. So I told John Francis, when we do these events, I can either preach or blacksmith. I can't do both. And so we're teaming up, and Jeff will sneak out in just a few minutes. And as we continue to kind of center ourselves and listen to a few of the testimonials from your community, Jeff will start firing up the forge, and then we'll have a chance. The last 20 minutes or so of the program will be outside, and you'll have an opportunity if you want to. There's never any pressure, but if you want to, you'll have an opportunity to take the hammer. So thanks, my brother, for being here. We're going to ground ourselves in a moment. Jeff will sneak out, but we start with a sort of a spirit of lament and recognizing where we're at, right? And kind of how we got to the point that we are in America. I think it's also important to even go back before America and realize that this goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, right? The inaugural act outside of the Garden of Eden was Cain killing Abel. It's actually the first time the word sin is used in the Bible. It's not in the Garden of Eden, but in the inaugural murder, the murder of Cain killing his brother. And it also says that the blood cries out to God from the ground. And that's a really important kind of starting point for the whole story, right? That when life is lost, God feels it. And the blood continues to cry out to God from the ground. The blood of Native Americans, the blood of Africans who were enslaved and subjugated. It's almost impossible to imagine America without guns. It's how we were able to take land and build a country on stolen labor. And so we remember all that, but we also remember the unique place that we find ourselves right now, where guns are the number one cause of death of American children. And I'm going to read you a few stats, and I'll invite you, because I know we're in a little liturgical space. You can say back, Lord, have mercy. Let's try it again. Lord, have mercy. So for many years, guns have been the number one cause of death of African American youth, who are 10 times more likely to die than other children in America. But in the pandemic, guns became the number one cause of death of all of our children. Lord, have mercy. In America, we have about 5% of the world's population, but we have almost half of the world's guns. Lord, have mercy. In America, we manufacture 9.5 million guns a year. That's 26,000 guns a day, over 1,000 guns an hour, 18 guns a minute, 1 gun every 3 seconds. Lord, have mercy. We have 5 times more gun dealers in America than McDonald's restaurants. Lord, have mercy. It's not an argument for more McDonald's. Since 1979, our gun deaths have been between 30 and 40,000 a year. So in my lifetime, I'm 47 years old, we've lost more lives to guns domestically in America than in all of the casualties of all of America's wars combined. Lord, have mercy. When we think of the gun deaths, it's been mentioned that suicide makes up over half of the gun deaths, sometimes up to 2/3 of the deaths from guns. And this is why guns are so important, because they don't give you a second chance, right? Almost everyone that attempts suicide with a gun dies. And yet, what's interesting is when you look at other methods of trying to take your own life, almost 80% of people survive. They do get a second chance, depending on what the method that they use is. And they do not, a majority of them, do not go on to die by suicide. So access to a gun and thwarting the first suicide attempt is massive. So let's remember all of those lives that have been lost to suicide. Lord. Particularly our military service members, the suicide rate is even higher. It's twice the rate of civilians. So the number one cause of death of military service members and veterans, the number one cause of death of military service members is not war, not combat, but suicide. More military service members end up dying by their own guns than military combatant guns. So we remember all those who've been devastated by war and come back haunted by it, and many of them end up taking their own lives. Lord, have mercy. Comes to military service, to the police officers. It's no surprise that it's so tragic that the number one cause of death of police officers in the line of duty is guns. 90% of the deaths of police officers and law enforcement officers are guns. And what's so important is we still have bullets that are legal in this country that are designed to pierce through body armor. We still have guns that, like these military-style weapons, that are designed to kill folks in combat, and they take so many lives, including the lives of law enforcement officers. So let's remember them, Lord. Have mercy. There's so many other aspects as we kind of researched this and looked at it. Certainly, like domestic abuse is a major factor of this. And so many of the folks that are victims of domestic violence end up becoming victims of domestic homicide, because a gun in the house makes a victim of domestic violence 5 times more likely to become a victim of domestic homicide. So let's remember all of those who are victims of violence in their own homes. Lord, have mercy. We could keep going, but I think we see the tragedy. And there's folks out there who will say, you know, it's not a gun problem, it's a heart problem. And what we like to say is it can be both. It can be a gun problem and a heart problem. And the fact is, we could get rid of every gun, and folks would still find ways to kill other people, right? Folks have used cars as a weapon. Folks have used airplanes as a weapon. Folks have used a pressure cooker and turned it into a bomb in the Boston Marathon, right? And yet, guns are designed for one purpose, which is to take life. And guns like the AR-15 are designed to take so many lives. When you think about cars, and cars are not designed to kill, but they can be deadly, right? So we think of all the things that we've done to try to protect people from cars. You require folks to pass a test, right? They have to get a license. If they abuse that license, then it can be taken away. We have a technology that we've added airbags and seatbelt laws. We have speed limits. We have age limits, right? Isn't it wild that you can buy a gun? In many places, you can buy an assault rifle even before you're able to buy a beer or to vote or to rent a car, right? And so we see even this past week's 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds that are responsible for a disproportionate amount of the lives lost. So there's things that we can do. We know that we can do to save lives. Not like I take a lot of cues from Martin Luther King. And Dr. King said, a law cannot make you love me, but it can make it harder for you to kill me. And that's what we're going for, right? Right now we're making it really easy for people to kill other folks. And we can't legislate love. You can't outlaw racism and hatred, but we can make it harder for people to kill. And so that's why it is a policy problem. It is a legislative problem. And 90% of Americans want to see change. 80% of gun owners want to see change. We got whole coalitions of hunters against assault weapons and gun owners concerned about gun violence because we know that we can do better. Even in Pennsylvania, one of our laws is one handgun a month. One handgun a month. It says a person can only purchase 12 handguns a year. And that law still gets overturned by an extremist gun law, right? Who needs more than 12 handguns in a year? Someone that's not making the world safer, right? And that's what we call these common sense laws. Laws that would limit the capacity that guns can shoot without reloading. Things that would require stolen guns to be reported. Access to information so we can see the gun shops that are responsible disproportionately for the crime guns that end up on our streets. So those are the things that we're going for, but we're also believing in the heart change. And I believe that gun violence reveals a spiritual sickness in the church. Like one of the things that we grew up talking about was being pro-life. And yet when you look at the statistics that we talk about in our book, we discovered this. The largest gun-owning demographic in America is Christians. Folks that are worshiping the Prince of Peace on Sunday are the ones that are packing in, right? And just to bring it home, this is one of the top-selling Bible cases in America. One of the top-selling Bible cases in America. But when my friend gave it to me, and I didn't think much of it. It looked like what I had in high school. And I opened it up. Oh, it's a concealed carry case. It's not a Bible case at all. And that's why we say, it's not extreme to call this idolatry. Right? Because idols are things that we treat with God-like reverence. We treat as if they're sacred, as if they're God. But they're not. And we're willing to sacrifice lives. We're willing to die for them and kill for them. That's what idols are. And so this is, I think, an opportunity for us today to also declare that some may trust in chariots and some may trust in horses, right? But our faith is in God. And a lot of this is about fear and faith. You know, folks a lot of folks are scared and they're arming themselves. Especially a lot of people who have been the power brokers, right? The folks who have held the power in this country are beginning to arm themselves. And it should concern us, right? But our fears are produced right? We cite this study in our book that shows how irrational our fears are. And in fact, this particular study was talking about immigrants and refugees, right? That we're so often being told, all these lies about this is what they're going to do to us. They're coming from Mexico, they're gangsters and all this, whatever, you heard it, But this study said, it listed a dozen things that are more likely to kill you than a refugee or an immigrant. Let me just tell you a few of them. Lightning, roller coasters, a cow, John Francis. A cow is more likely to kill you than an immigrant, right? It kept going. One of them was a vending machine falling on you is more likely to kill you than an immigrant or refugee. And we also see that one of the biggest threats to public safety in America are white folks, white young men with guns, who over and over are becoming the terrorizers of our country. So we gotta say, no, I'm not gonna fear like I'm being conditioned to fear by some news stations. Right? I'm not gonna fear. I'm gonna stand on the scripture that says, perfect love casteth out fear. And I get it, right? This is why I love Jesus in the gospel. And Jesus is constantly showing us a different way than violence. Right? Jesus, the Prince of Peace. And the last reflection I'll offer is that story where Peter, Jesus' disciple, picks up a sword. And you got to remember, I remind myself, Peter heard the Sermon on the Mount live. He didn't even watch it on Zoom. He heard it. He was there, right? He's been walking with Jesus. He's been discipled by the Son of God. And then the soldiers come. And Peter still impulsively picks up a sword and he cuts one of the guy's ears off. And Jesus' response is stunning and beautiful. He first rebukes Peter. He says, no! Put that away! You live by the sword, you die by the sword. Come on, man. You don't get it. And then Jesus heals the man that Peter wounded. Puts his ear back on. It's pretty sweet, right? You have it out there, right? Puts the ear back on the man. And what the early Christians said is when Jesus disarmed Peter, he disarmed every one of us. Amen. Because if ever there was an argument to be made for using violence in a redemptive way, for trying to protect the innocent with violence, Peter had the best case there ever was. And yet Jesus is showing us, no, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. We do not return evil for evil. We do not fight violence on its own terms. So this is why I think it's a crisis in the church, right? When we're talking about all these other issues of life, but we're often ignoring or even complicit or defending guns rather than our children. That's a problem, right? And so that's why we're here today. That's why you showed up on a Saturday in Madison. And that's why we're going to listen to a couple of the voices in your community that have been impacted by this. Because they're going to prepare us as we go out to the forge together. So I'm going to invite John Francis up, and we're going to hear from, I think, two different folks in your community. And they're sharing a deep part of them. So just honor them by listening and taking it in, and then know that we'll process out singing in just a minute.
Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
Go ahead and Shane. Thank you, Shane. Well, we prepared two testimonials for today. I haven't met Tim yet. Is Tim present?
He's not here, but we have representatives here.
Oh, wonderful. Would you like to come forward and share a story? Share your story. And who do I have the pleasure of meeting today?
Deacon Barbara McKinney.
Deacon Barbara McKinney. Welcome.
Christ is out about.
Welcome. Welcome.
So I get the opportunity to introduce two people. And when you hear their stories, you're going to connect and understand why this is so important. We started a ministry based upon the testimony of these two women. Tim is not here, But they'll come and they will introduce themselves and they will share their story. Even today, when they heard what they heard, they were already connected. And it touched them in a special way. And so I'm going to invite Wendy and I'm going to invite Bishop to come and share their stories. And as they share their stories, I want you to pray for them. Because this is not easy.
Yeah.
They're going to tell you when it happened, how it happened, the lives that were lost, and how the pain is still there. So pray for them as they share.
Hi, my name is Wendy Thompson, and I lost my oldest son exactly 6 months and 13 days. As you were telling your story of how your wife seen AR-15 and just wonder how the kids could look at it and, in school, and that's what took my son. My son was shot 6 times with AR-15. So just me seeing my son was killed. He was shot 6 times with an AR-15. So that just, I'm standing here looking at you and holding the barrel, and I'm like, oh my God. That's what he looked at before he took his last breath. He was celebrating his birthday. He was going on his 28th birthday. He passed away April the 2nd. He was going back home to Michigan to visit family. We're from Detroit, Michigan. So he made it to see his grandmother and his sisters and nieces and nephews. And in the process, he was going to Cleveland, Ohio to visit his auntie and her kids. Sean recently just got out of Dane County. So apparently he met or friended a guy that hadn't seen his kids. So he's like, oh, I'm going through Ohio where they live. I can stop and check on your kids for you. Not knowing the girl had a new boyfriend and killed my son in front of his daughter, 1-year-old daughter, and his girlfriend. So it just so hit me all over again a couple of days ago. You actually had one, and I'm looking at the barrel, and it was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
One day at a time. It's sad because he has a 1-year-old daughter, and she won't be able to get those memories with Dad. He was too young for her to even get Social Security, so I gotta step in and do what I gotta do to make sure she gets what she needs now. It's just been a lot. One of my really close friends, when I moved down here, I worked in assisted living. He killed himself by gun suicide October the 13th. So it was just like first him, and then shortly after that it was my son. So it's just like one after another after another after another, and it's just been beating me down. Somewhere.
I'm just praying for you.
You're all right.
Hello, my name is Shane Claiborne. I've lived in Madison since '92. I had my first son here, which is named Shane Jackson. He was killed 4 years ago. May 16th was the day he got shot. He got shot, but I had to pull the plug on him, so I had to do it in 3 days. So I had to go through, hoping that there was a miracle somewhere. He got shot with one single bullet in his neck, savaged his skull from his spine. So there was no way that he could have lived. I had to pull the plug on him. It's sad. It's kind of crazy because his football coach was the guy that was supposed to do an operation on him. So my son was born in the church. I was raised in the church. So on May 16th is when this happened to him, 2018. You can go to China 3000 News and look it up. He got shot, hospital, and we celebrate 3 days. 3 days out of the day for my son. I do. Everybody else don't want to because they don't want to live the memories of the 3 days, but I do because it's my son. He was my first best friend, and he was taken from me through gun violence in Monona, Wisconsin. And I'm not able to put anything out for my sons, for his memory, for anything to let anyone knows that he was shot there, or he was there. So I don't have any memories you could go by. I don't even like driving down Lake Point in Monona. It's very, I feel the presence every time I go that way to this day, and it's been 4 years ago. The impact that it has had on me and his siblings. I have a 9-year-old daughter that has a birthday the same day as his, and she was born on his birthday. So crazy because he had worn all white on the day that she was born. I thought that was crazy, and I was almost like, God, I don't even want this baby because what's going to happen to my son? I felt something then when my son had on that all white and she was born on his day, which was not the day that she was supposed to be born. So she got a chance to be with him for 4 years of her life, and she remembers him. She talks about him, and she has good stories, and she helps me get out of stuff when I'm feeling a little down and stuff. So it has an impact on her and me as well. But when I look at her, I think of him. And she's a girl, but she got his ways a little bit, you know. So it's like he has an older brother that he's dealing with it, like in silence. So he kind of turned away from God. He feel that he ain't told me this, but when we have talks, it just tells me that he felt that it was a God and his brother would still be alive. So, and I have to tell him, no, that's not true. So there is a God, and he's still alive. He's just with us in heart and spirit and you know, in truth. So it's just like he's your God now. And so he'd be like, well, I'm not gonna go into all that, but it's really deep for my son because he was such a joyful kid. He's such a happy boy. He's 21 years old. Thank God he's not out selling drugs and shooting up and doing anything. I got him into working. He's working. He's doing good. And I want him to stay there. I get scared because I be like, oh God, what are you doing? What, you know, so I love the fact that he likes to be at home. So he turned himself into a hermit. So he's at home. He go to work, he come home. Or he'll go to my mom's house, or, you know. So his life is not the normal 21-year-old life that you would have with your brother or sister, because he doesn't have that. My daughter, she deals with it. I have a 27-year-old daughter. She deals with it with she deals with it. And I have a grandbaby that never met my son. He would have been a great son, grandbaby. But we have been impacted very, very hard and different for my family, but for me, because that was my first best friend, the first person who I loved, first person who loved me, and the first person who called me mom. and I miss him so much. It's like it happened today. And the person who shot my son was his girlfriend's child's father. Shot him over, I can't even say, that he was with this older lady because my son was 24 at the time, and this older lady was 30-something years old. And so you could do the math on dealing with a young old man dealing with an older woman. But that's...
So how are you coping now? Would you share how you are coping now?
Well, we have the gun violence, the grieving gun violence. I really love that because that helps me speak, and you get to speak, and you get to tell your truth on how you feel. And I feel that's helping me a lot, and I like to help others. So when I hear that, I want to step in and just give my support, because they really too much can do but give support when in that type of situation. So that's what I'm willing to do for anyone that is dealing with what I'm going through.
Right, because that was the whole reason.
This is the whole reason for us.
That was the whole reason for us putting together the group or the breakfast at the church. So it's more than just, it's parents, it's siblings, it's the community, it's everybody is hurting somehow. Whether it's suicide, whether it's done by somebody else, domestic violence, because it could clearly even not even be a gun, it could just be by somebody else's hand. So just to have somewhere to talk and get it off your chest, maybe, somebody might know a different way of grieving, coping with grieving that you might not know, that might be helpful to you. Just like I also experienced that there's a lot of males, fathers, grandfathers, uncles that are grieving just as hard as some of us females, mothers, grandmothers, and they keep it to themselves. They hold it in. Just to have an open space where anybody can come in, talk, listen, even just to be around somebody else that understands or is feeling what you're feeling. Right.
So just one more thing, another way that I cope is I stay close to God. I sing praise and worship, so that really helps me out a lot to get through my life, my daily, everyday life. If I didn't have God in my life, it wasn't real in the church there, I probably would be away, and I probably wouldn't know how to stand. And most people say, how do you do it? How strong you is? No, I'm not strong. It's just God. He does this to me. He gives me the strength that I need to go to live my day-to-day life. And that's why I really depend on and my support system from my church and my family. And, you most definitely need a support system in this type of situation.
I was thinking as I listened to you all, one of the moms in our neighborhood, she said, always take courage that God knows what it feels like to lose your son. And we remember that there's a God who knows what it feels like to be heartbroken, even to the point of saying, why have you forsaken me? So we thank you for the courage of these sisters and their family, for this whole circle of resilience and strength that they represent. We pray that you would heal the wounds of our hearts, of our communities, of our streets, of our nation, even those who have been the perpetrators of violence, that you would heal them. think of you as, it says you wept over Jerusalem, Jesus, because they didn't know peace. We know that you're weeping with all those who weep in our country. Thank you for this moment that we can declare hope, even despite the evidence sometimes. Thank you for these courageous women that share their story.
So the church we did not name, we are from Christ Solid Rock Baptist Church on 1400 Buckeye Road, and the second Saturday of every month, we hold our support group. And so if you know someone who is hurting or not able to express themselves in a community or group of love, have them come to visit with us the second Saturday of every month at 10 o'clock or an hour.
Thank you so much, Deacon. And thank you, ladies. Thank you so much for gracing us, Christ the Solid Rock, and for being here with us at Grace Church. We have one more testimonial before we go out to the Forge. And she is part of our family here at Grace Church. Please welcome Lynn. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Liz Calhofer. I'm not a testimonial kind of person. When I heard John Francis was organizing this event, I asked him whether there was going to be someone who was going to speak from the suicide by gun point of view, because I wanted to make sure that that was on the table. We hear in the news about school shootings and violence in our neighborhoods, but suicide by gun violence, I believe, is a silent killer. We heard some statistics, and I won't repeat them, but if you do the math, out of the 110, it's 65 a day. And when I hear your stories, and when I think about our story, I think about the families, 65 a day. Just by suicide, 110 total. It's heartbreaking. In our family, we lost a nephew to suicide by gun. He was found by his sister. His twin brother survived him. We're survivors. I didn't think of myself as a survivor. About 7 years ago, I went to a Moms Demand Action after one son's school shooting. I don't even remember what it is anymore. And I never really thought about our family as survivors of gun violence, but we are, as you are. And his dad, died early. I think of a broken heart with a heart attack, but it was a broken heart, and it affects. It was shocking to me to see those guns in this space. I worship here every Sunday. What is this, right? What is this? And, I don't know what the answer is, but in suicide, there are kinds, nobody talks about gun control anymore, in the people who do the kinds of things you do. Gun control is really, it's common sense gun legislation, and people do support it. And things like the requirement to have guns locked down, right, in your house, put it in a locked case, because there's so much impulse involved in suicide. And that's why, when you attempt suicide with a gun, 90% of the time you're successful. But it doesn't recur. So if you can intervene with that. So Lord have mercy. And we will pray for you in this congregation, I promise that. And I pray for your healing. It does get better over time, but it never goes away, right? So thank you for this opportunity. But do remember those families that you don't hear about in the news who are affected by gun violence, which is why I wanted to talk today. So thank you.
Well, I believe the remainder of the evening we will process out the tower doors. It's time for that, isn't it? Yes. I'm going to be leading us in a song as we process, and then I'll be joining you and Shane and Jeff Wiley at the ford, which is in the courtyard. So we'll go out those doors there and make a right and come around the corner. Let's join together in singing Down by the Riverside again. I'm gonna lay my soul cheap down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. My soul cheap down by the riverside, my soul. Ain't gonna study more no more. 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 Ain't gonna study more. You can feel free to rise to your feet and begin the procession out the doors. Ain't no study more, 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 ain't no study
All right, let's head down. We're good?
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you need a oh, it's battery. That's great. Okay.
All right, all right. Down by the forge. Here we are.
Shane and I are going to work as sort of a tag team. Shane will be working to make a Maddock, and that's where you can be involved if you want to do some land as well. Well, I am going to be cutting um, a barrel that will make the hand shovel with. Um, and that involves more cutting than actually blacksmithing. So we'll probably be passing the mic back and forth and kind of working back and forth as a tag team here.
So we're gonna invite you if you want to. You can take the hammer with us. We the forge that people always ask is about 1,400 degrees or so, and then about.
This is a Wisconsin forge. It's 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's why you didn't have to come warm it up. It's but we often, in the scripture you see images of God as fire. Of course, Pentecost, but also um, the burning bush, right? And it's that image of fire that we sometimes say it's a powerful image for God because it's the fire that actually heats up the metal and allows it to be crafted. And if you don't heat up the metal, it can crack. That's why we sometimes say that's what happened to Pharaoh, right? Is his heart hardened because he stayed away from the fire too long. So we'll keep bringing it back to the fire and allowing it to be recrafted. If you want to take the hammer, you can get behind. We'll have a little line here, and we'll let you take the hammer, and we'll return it to the fire so it can heat back up. We'll sing as we go.
Here's the one if you need it. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer if I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd bring out danger, I'd bring out justice, bring out love, peace, my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. If I had a hammer in the morning,
gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Oh, no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Amen.
Mike Martin were here, he would say, you always get a, there's a lot of sermons in the forge, but one of them is that you take this kind of cold, dark metal, and when it comes into the forge, it begins to take on the character of the forge, of the fire. It begins to burn and heat, and it's kind of a reminder that every time we're spending time with God and with the Spirit, we're praying that we would begin to act more like God, right? That we would take on the character of Jesus. So that's one sermon from the forge. Jeff's opening the shovel there. So this is a shotgun barrel that he's opening up, and this is the first step. He sliced it in the middle, and then he'll open it up into the shovel. So it's a pretty cool part of the process. Flat side, yep.
before.
Yeah, did it.
Deal. I'm supposed to have more of a collar here, and for some reason I have one I can finish up here. So you know I was supposed to.
So we'll have, if you haven't had a chance to take the hammer and you want to, you can come on over, and then in just a moment we'll dedicate it, do a closing prayer, and we'll hang out. We've got some stuff you can look at inside right out of the guns, and it's a beautiful day. So we'll leave the forge up going too. If you didn't get a chance or you want to do it again, you can come back up. But yeah, thanks for being a part of this. So we'll let one or two more folks go, and then we'll dedicate the plow.
Well, I'll see if they've got something structured. I might put the camera back on. Otherwise, we can fade it out. Yeah. Just wrap it up. So just kind of play it by ear, I guess. Yeah. No, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
I didn't know what I was getting into. Wow. It's real stuff here. And my younger brother is a landscape architect, and he and his partner designed the Sandy Hook Memorial. So they'll just be unveiling it
Where is that now again?
That's in Connecticut. Near Newton, Connecticut.
Okay.
And just coming up on the 10-year anniversary, December 12th. So he's had a lot of contact with the families.
Wow.
And,
is that where he lives in Connecticut? There?
No, he's just moved to Minnesota from California, but there was a competition.
Okay.
Yeah. He and his partner had a very compelling design that's resonated with a lot of the families.
Shane and I are going to start a TV program.
Yeah, that's hot.
So as we close, I don't know if you've seen Walter Brueggemann, who's actually a dear friend, and he's part of this movement. He wrote a book called The Prophetic Imagination. And one of the things that he says is that we often misunderstand the biblical prophets, and we think that they were fortune tellers, right? That they were trying to predict the future. And he says that's not quite it. The prophets were truth tellers, and they weren't trying to predict the future, they were trying to change it. They were inviting us to imagine a different world than the one that we live in right now. And so, as we do this work, we're kind of declaring that, right? That things can be made different. Metal can be recrafted, our country can be reimagined, death doesn't have to get the last word. So thank you for being a part of this day. It is sort of that prophetic declaration. And it's the swords and the plows, the spears and the pruning hooks that kind of invite us to imagine that things can be made new. And in light of that, Brother Jeff's going to dedicate the plow to the community here in Madison.
I'm going to have a popular word prayer. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this day, for testimonies to the pain of violence, for Shane's witness, for John Francis' song. We thank you for this gathering to think about something which is very unpleasant and even painful, gun violence. We are grateful that we get to be a part of a movement of turning firearms into garden tools, that we get to be a part of that because we are members of your peaceable kingdom, which you came and bore witness to in your coming. Blessed are the peacemakers. We are pleased to be together. Bless our time as we depart. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. I'm happy to hand over a hand trowel to be used here as you work in these beautiful gardens, and to remember that we're helping to restore God's creation with something that was once a tool of violence, and now is something, a tool that leads to peace and healing. I'm happy to give this to you, John.
And I'm going to give it to her record.
That's the work, buddy.
Well, thank you all. Thanks for coming.
Nice job, dude. Oh, just held the camera.
Yeah.